Okay.
Right now, ladies and gentlemen, Kris Van Cleave, CBS News,
Hey, everybody.
here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back.
That's great to be here.
You've been busy, huh?
Oh, it's always busy. You know, there's no stopping, and there's always an aviation angle. You know.
Yeah.
So-
Maybe some might not know who you are. I'm sure a lot of people do. Can you explain who you are,
Sure.
Kris?
I'm CBS News senior transportation correspondent. I cover a lot of aviation. Had the great opportunity to profile you and your great venture here. Last summer, I guess it was.
Yeah, it was last year.
And you've only continued to explode and grow. And we've been talking about coming back and joining you for an afternoon.
Yes.
And was finally in town and free on a Sunday.
There you go.
So
now, what kind of stories do you cover at CBS?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. You know, the beat is anything that moves. So it's a lot of aviation. We're probably 65% of the stories are aviation focused, whether that's summer travel, holiday travel, an event or something that happens with a plane in the air.
Right.
Those things that are caught on tape. And this year, certainly a lot of Boeing has been the news. And then a little bit of like the regulatory stuff. I mean, that sort of bounces off Boeing or whatever the big thing that's going on. And then kind of anything that moves falls into the beat. So that can be cars or innovation. It can be electric vehicles. It can be automotive safety. You know, I think we're getting closer and closer to autonomous air taxis being a reality.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
And, you know, that'll be part of what we cover. We do a little bit of space. My colleague, Mark Strassman, does most of that. But it's, you know, it's busy. It's a busy beat. Was here this week, had a couple of stories, a couple pegged to holiday travel, summer travel. Fly home to Phoenix tonight, go to Seattle tomorrow. We'll be up there doing a couple of stories, one with Boeing for a few days, and then we'll see what the next week brings.
You know, the world of aviation, I mean, it's never a dull moment, is it?
No, you know, we jokingly...
Take one step further.
We jokingly say there's always an aviation angle, and it's pretty true. I mean, in almost anything we cover, things that resonate, there is often some tie to the planes you're watching taxi by right now.
What would you say is the biggest aviation-related story you've covered so far this year?
I mean, I think Boeing, starting with the door panel that blew off the Alaska flight in January and all of the ripples of that. The questions that it raised about the pace the planes were being built, how it was being done, the quality control issues, not only at Boeing, but at Spirit AeroSystems, who makes the fuselage of those airplanes.
Right.
I mean, it brought back all of the questions that were circling around the two MAX accidents in 2018 and 2019. And I think for those of us that covered the beat then, this felt a lot like Groundhog Day. Like I thought that we're talking about the same things again, except the focus this time is the production, not the design.
Right.
But same kinds of problems that now have to get fixed on a different side of the coin, but feel a lot like we did this already.
Right. And obviously the story continues. It doesn't, every day there's something that pops up on my feed.
Yeah, you know.
It's going to keep you busy. And
Boeing's going to get a new CEO by the end of the year. I think from they're poised to acquire Spirit AeroSystems. I mean, there's those business elements. There's also the questions that I think a lot of people continue to have about safety. And can you trust that the plane that they built, looks like there's an Air Canada MAX taxiing by. You know, how confident is everybody in that production process? You know, the FAA sounds pretty confident. Boeing continues to stress that it is that they're confident in their process. But you know, there are questions.
Have you done that story? Because there was a story that popped up on my feed on Facebook. It wasn't from you guys, but there was a story that came out that said that there was a lot of people that are changing their flights. If they see it's a Boeing plane, they're changing their flight. Have you encountered that?
Kayak has a search engine now where you can search basically airplane types. You can plan an itinerary that avoids the MAX.
Okay.
The fact is, it's really not easy to do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only a handful of airlines that guarantee you won't be on a Boeing airplane.
Right.
And if JetBlue, Spirit, Frontier don't go where you need to go in the U.S. domestically, there's no guarantee you can avoid getting on a Boeing airplane. And the MAX is flown by all of the legacies except for Delta.
Yeah. Yet.
So far.
It's coming soon.
So
yeah.
far. You know, it would be a very challenging travel experience. My buddy Aaron is here with me, and he's one of the friends that I travel with a lot. We talk a lot about travel planning. We should actually try that as an exercise to see if we can get where we want to go and only do it on one airplane manufacturer or avoid one airplane type. It's really hard.
Yeah.
You know, unless you don't mind a circuitous route or more expensive route, or maybe going into a city near where you want to go.
Can I ask you, I've been talking about this, and since we're on the subject of this, now I could be completely wrong in this, but I don't know. My gut is saying, because of what we're talking about with the Boeing issue and whatever, Southwest for the longest time has been a 737 airline for the longest time. They're feeling the issues with Boeing now. They're open to a merger, possibly. My gut is saying a possible merger between Spirit and Southwest only because of the issues with Boeing. My question to you is not, do you think that's going to be a merger, but do you think we're going to see a lot more mergers in the coming years because of everything that's going on with the lack of planes and the lack of staff and stuff like that?
You know, I think you've two elements of that. One is who's in the White House.
Yeah.
The Biden administration has not favored consolidation generally.
Right.
So they blocked the JetBlue Spirit merger in part because they viewed it as anti-competitive.
Right.
And I think you could make an argument that it was. I mean, JetBlue's plan was to buy Spirit to have the airplanes to rip out the seats put in their configuration, which would remove low-price seats from the marketplace, leave some markets that Spirit was serving. That would result in prices rising. It's hard to argue that it would.
Correct.
You know, and Southwest is not truly a low-fare carrier, so I think they'd have the same. They'd struggle with some of the same arguments to win over the current administration, the current regulatory position. Could that change? Absolutely. You know, could Spirit and Frontier merge tomorrow? That would seem to be easier to approve because they're the same kind of carrier, doing the same kind of business model. So some of the concerns about being less competitive or raising prices maybe aren't there the same way because they're gaining scale to better compete.
Right.
But, you know, I think we've certainly seen United have the conversation about what does our order book look like and can we get our hands on some of these Airbus A321s that JetBlue and Spirit have deferred.
Right.
And if so, and they've not announced that deal, but we know they've considered it. They've not been quiet about looking at it. If they were to make that deal with Airbus, that'll be a direct one-to-one reduction in their MAX 10 order. So it's certainly on their minds. It's a little bit different with Southwest, where you've got a single fleet type, and that goes into their economy of scale. But I think anything is on the table because we don't know. You've got an activist investor at Southwest, that could push for new leadership. New leadership that's not of Southwest could come in with a new idea.
Right.
You saw Alaska Airlines, which for a while had a mixed fleet, very quickly, faster than a lot of people thought they would, dump even relatively new A321s to go all Boeing because it just made the fleet easier.
Right.
So it adds complexity. Adding complexity presents the challenge of disruption.
I'm telling you, it just goes on and on. It's like a new chapter every single week.
Yeah.
Now, how did you get into? Have you been an aviation buff like all your life? AvGeek. What's your background? What got you into the whole aviation part of doing your job?
You know, my dad was a private pilot, so I grew up around small planes. Always have liked to travel. We were always a family that traveled, and the only way you get there is on an airplane.
Yeah.
So I always loved this ability to like start your day in one place and end up somewhere totally different. And that would come into as I was covering stories over the years in the local markets that I worked in. The airplane story, the aviation story, the travel story would be one I'd enjoy doing. When I was working in Washington, I was our investigative reporter at the ABC station. The transit agency there had an accident. I spent a lot of time then looking into how the transit agency worked. So when I went to CBS, I had a bit of a background already and knew the people and who to call, and that really helped when we had some folks retire and the musical chairs started, and we needed to move some bodies around, and I ended up sort of filling in on the transportation beat. We had a couple of big stories during that fill-in time. Amtrak 188 derailed on the 8th day of my tryout.
Wow.
And 30 days into that sort of fill-in period, it sort of just stuck, and that was 2015. So here we are.
Wow. I mean, other networks, they don't have aviation.
My counterpart at NBC's Tom Costello.
Okay.
Before him was Bob Hager, who I think probably defined transportation reporting for television. Gio Benitez at ABC. Pete Montine, who of the four of us is the only pilot, I will say, at CNN.
Wow.
So, most of the networks do have somebody.
Okay.
It is a beat that has high interest. You know this. Just look how many people are watching you every time you're on.
Oh yeah.
It's a people. There's something about planes that just resonate with folks.
Yeah.
And travel that just resonates. So it's a high interest beat for us, and it's been great. It's any day you get to go to the airport or hang out on on the tarmac or see a new plane, it's a fun day.
Can I ask you this? And this is kind of there was an A321 Neo that had an emergency landing here on Tuesday, and we covered that, and I tend to put it on social media so people can see it if they didn't see it. And a lot of the comments, certainly Boeing plane, the attention, certainly with the news media, is all about that. When it's an A321, a lot of the comments come in and say, well, the news media really doesn't care. This is an Airbus. If it was a Boeing, it would be a bigger deal. Obviously, that is not the case. But the perception is, I think, around the world that everyone's focused so tightly on Boeing and what's going on with Boeing, that overall, every day there is an emergency around the world. It doesn't matter if it's a Boeing or an Airbus. I think some people just feel like, well, the media is just hounding a little bit more on Boeing.
Every day there are several emergency landings in the United States. Not all of them are newsworthy. Just like that every day there are a certain number of go-arounds, missed approaches, things that don't always get covered because sometimes they're routine. There was one at Reagan National the other day. It was just simply that they felt like they needed to give a little bit more time for the plane to turn off the runway, and the safer thing to do would have the incoming plane loop around and do it again. That said, you had a go-around over Oklahoma where a Southwest plane dipped below 500 feet and set off an alarm in the tower.
Right.
Well, that shouldn't happen.
Right.
That's more newsworthy than a routine go-around.
Right.
So there is more attention on Boeing right now, no question.
Right.
And I would say deservedly so. And has that been good for Airbus in the sense that we're not talking about the engine issues on the A321 Neos that Frontier, Spirit, and JetBlue are experiencing?
Right.
I mean, you go down to the Goodyear Airport in Phoenix, outside Phoenix, and there's a line of brand new or fairly new Spirit planes that are lined up without engines.
Wow.
So when we talk about Spirit being in a challenging financial position, part of that is because they've got a bunch of airplanes that can't fly.
Right.
And yes, they'll get some compensation from the engine maker, but it's coming at a bad time for Spirit to not have, a dozen or more airplanes on the ground during the summer when you could be running those pretty full. That story hasn't gotten the coverage that Boeing has, but it also, when you talk about planes have to be grounded because an engine needs to be fixed versus a part of a plane flew off mid-flight, it's not a one-to-one comparison.
Right.
So the scrutiny is on Boeing, deservedly so. It doesn't mean that issues with an Airbus plane don't get covered. It just doesn't mean. But if we put every emergency landing on television.
What about my holy moly? I think that made national news, right?
I mean, your 747 landing was seen around the world.
Yes. Yeah.
That hard landing, and that was a good opportunity for us, I think, to explain and to put context on something like that, because things can look scary and not be. Right. The compressor stall.
Right. Yeah.
And look, if I was sitting on that plane looking out the window and there's fire coming out of the back of the engine, I'm gonna be a little uncomfortable. Yeah. But that looks scary. It's a pretty low risk situation. Right. They're going to turn that engine off. They're going to turn around. They're going to land. But if it's caught on tape, or is it going to be on television the next day? Yes, it will.
Yes, of course. Yeah. No, I mean, I worked in TV news. I know. I mean, you have to have something visually that tells the story, obviously, for a good story. All right, real quick. I know a lot of people are asking some questions here. Heath Shelton with the $5 super chat. Thanks so much, Heath. Says, hi, Kevin. Question for Kris. What are your thoughts on COMAC and its potential to be a competitor to Boeing and Airbus? That is the Chinese manufacturer.
You know, we did a deep dive on the COMAC 919 for CBS Mornings and the CBS Evening News about a year ago. You know, it is in many ways a Frankenplane, where you have taken a lot of the design elements of the 737 and the Airbus, and in some cases the same components that and built an airplane that eventually China will source completely from China. I think to underestimate the ability of Chinese industry is to do so at your own peril. I don't think you're going to see the 919 flying into the U.S. anytime soon, or its big brother, the 929, the wide-body plane they want to build, and they eventually will.
Right.
I think that's an airplane you'll see in the developing world. I think that it will certainly have sales beyond China. Those sales will come at the expense of Airbus and Boeing. You've heard Scott Kirby talk about wanting a third competitor to Boeing and Airbus, but not one in China. I think he was talking mainly to Embraer in Brazil.
Right.
Could you look at building a bigger version of your regional jets? But there's certainly a market, and if they can price it, and certainly the way that China has aggressively moved into the developing world, and the debt that they hold of those countries, could certainly be influential in some countries' decisions to buy the COMAC versus the Boeing or the Airbus. It's certainly, I think, the other thing it does is it, over time, brings about a situation where the door closes to Boeing and Airbus in China, which is a huge market.
I mean, where do you think Boeing goes from here? I mean, there's always been talk that they have to come up with a replacement for the 757, which they should have done a long time ago. But there's there's been speculation that they're developing the 797, though people that work with Boeing say we got nothing on the plans. Where do you think they go from here? Do they just have to keep moving in the same direction? And
I think for Boeing, it's going to have to be a crawl, walk, run approach from here. They were trying to. They expected to have 737 MAX production pushing 60 planes a month, and that just proved to be untenable.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the reason that those bolts don't appear to have been screwed back into that door panel was the pace of the work, and the out of sequence work just led to confusion on the line. So,
and you got a close up. You got to go inside that plane and take a look at it, right?
We got inside. We got inside of one of the another Alaska Airlines plane while it was going through those inspections.
Okay.
So got a real good look at what those bolts are, where they are, and sort of the process they were going through to make sure that things were right.
Right.
So I think if you're Boeing right now, what you want to do is get back to the fundamentals. I mean, to make a sports analogy, when a team isn't performing, you go back to the blocking and the tackling and the execute the plan. They need to execute that plan. They need to build quality 737s and quality 787s and to start to deliver them as promised, or something resembling a reliable timeline, and gradually grow that. And then they got a lot of work ahead of them. I mean, they've got to get two types of the 737 certified. They've got Southwest is waiting on hundreds of 737 MAX 7s that can't be certified till the engine anti-ice issue is fixed and certified. And then you've got the 10, which also can't get certified till that's done. So they need those things off their plate. They have the 777X. That also has to get through certification. So they have some major projects that they have to get done. They also, they also have a next generation sort of Boeing plane that they're developing. They're moving. There are reports they're moving engineers off that to some of the other commercial things. Their space program has had some challenges.
Yes. Yeah.
They have a lot. They're doing a lot. So. The unfortunate part for that is, yes, the 757s are old, and they're going to be replaced if Airbus can get their extra long-range A321neos certified.
Right.
And those are behind schedule.
Well, how soon do you think until the average traveler starts feeling the pinch of what is been going on these last few years? Eventually, it's going to trickle down. If it hasn't already, I'm sure it has. But when it really kind of hits everyone.
I think to some extent you felt it this summer. You saw Southwest and United pare back their planned schedules.
Right.
You didn't feel it if you were traveling today. Like I'm not gonna get to Seattle because there's not a plane today.
Right.
But there's less frequency on some routes. They exited some routes. Southwest left markets because they didn't have the airplanes.
Right.
You're balancing that with. I think having to slow the growth plan does help in another way. It slows the demand for pilots at a time when there aren't enough pilots.
Right.
So, what we all thought a couple of years ago is we'd be feeling the impact of the pilot shortage. We haven't in the same way. But, how long can you, as United or Delta, fly your 757 fleet, some of which are already 40 years old?
Yeah.
The Delta plane that lost a wheel earlier this year was a 41-year-old airplane. It's safe, but less reliable. You're talking about doing like heavy maintenance checks for a fifth or sixth time, which wasn't the idea when you built the plane. So all of those things factor into growth. And what can you do? United, I think, has talked pretty openly that their United Next plan is going to next happen slower than they wanted it to because they don't have the airplanes to grow.
Right.
And maybe everyone slowing their roll a little bit in the aviation space isn't a bad thing. We've seen a lot of close calls on runways.
Right.
We've seen maintenance issues come up that probably shouldn't have happened. And then, of course, the Boeing stuff that raises some, safety experts in this space, the NTSB and others have said that, coming out of the pandemic, you have the safest system in the world. That envelope of safety maybe is eroded a little bit. So slowing the growth plan might not be a bad thing, other than for your Wall Street plan. But yeah, look, if Boeing is... If Southwest is waiting 5, 6, 7, 8 years for some of these airplanes, that's going to be a real problem.
Right.
If you're delaying the rollout plan by a year or 18 months, probably manage that. It's how long does it take to get the 7 built, or get the 7 certified, and then at what pace can you build them? Like they're not going to be at 60 planes a month for the foreseeable future. The regulator's not going to let them do it. It doesn't appear that under the new strategy that they have the manpower to do it. So they're just not going to get there. It's going to take longer to deliver their backlog of planes, but you can't cancel your order because it's a 10-year backlog at Airbus.
Yeah.
So everyone's just going to have to, wait.
Rita, I'm going to have you back up just to leave you. Black and our man. All right, I'm going to grab this shot. Stay right there, so we don't lose everyone here. They want to see the A380s. What do you think of the A380s, Kris? Have you ever been on one?
I have. I've flown on a Singapore A380. Back from Singapore to Frankfurt to JFK. We did a Sunday morning piece where we took the world's longest flight at the time from Newark to Singapore on the A350, one of the 7 specially designed ones to do that route. And then I had to leave earlier than the rest of the crew, so I took the A380 back through Frankfurt. What always amazes me about these giant planes, the A380, the 747, the big military cargo planes, is the way they seem to just kind of float.
Yeah.
And they hang in the air. They don't look like they're going very fast.
Do you think it's the end of the line for the A380, even though they say it is? Do you think the need for the A380?
I love the 747, and I wish that as a passenger airplane there was a market for it. I think you get into more and more niche markets for those 4-engine airplanes. Fuel's expensive, and the cost to operate that is high.
Well, in its current state, obviously, I don't think they'd ever bring it back. Though I have been saying, and I think a lot of people laugh at me and go, Kevin, you're ridiculous. The need for the A380, why they built that in the first place, was to get as many seats as they could, because they thought eventually the gate space would run out at these major airports. So I think the need for that is never going to go away. They just need to find a way to get 2 engines on that plane.
Yeah, yes, but also, do you want to be on the ultra low cost carrier A380 with you and 1,000 of your closest friends?
No.
Right. So that's the other challenge. You can put a lot more people on that airplane than you have right now. Are people going to sign up for that? Can you deliver a travel a price that people will go, okay, I and 1,000 other people want to climb on this plane to go to X city, but you can only go to certain cities because it's so big, it can't go to, like that plane is not landing at a second tier city anywhere in the country, and in many major cities it's not going to around the world. The airport's just not big enough.
And what about the opposite of that, with Global Airways in London planning A380 service to New York and LA, and a luxury A380 service?
I mean, we'll see if it works.
Yeah.
There are a lot of airline concepts that come and go. It is a tough business.
Yeah.
It could work. You could find a marketplace. Certainly, people are prioritizing premium travel in a way that they hadn't pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
It's part of the experience now, and people will pay that. Will they pay enough to cover the cost to operate the A380? Maybe.
No, it'd be interesting. You haven't talked to those guys, have you?
No, not yet. Not
okay.
yet. I want to see the airplane ready to fly, and then schedule some flights, and then I think we can look at it. But you have that sort of boutique, all business class experience from New York to Paris. Was it La Champagne? And that's been fairly successful.
Yeah.
Like there's a niche market if you can find the right airplane to do it.
Right.
I think the A380 is a big lift because you need a lot of really premium. It's either got to be super premium so that you put a few people that pay a fortune, or just premium enough that a lot of people want to do it.
Well, the other question is, they want to do Gatwick to LA. Now we have a Norse Dreamliner from Gatwick. I don't think the payload the load on that one is too high at this point. So I don't know. I wish them luck. Emirates can pull it off. Obviously, they have a fleet of many of those A380s, but it will be interesting.
Costs are a little different than some of the other airlines too.
Yeah.
I think the other question is, can you? The A380, where it has struggled compared to the 747, is the 747 is a better cargo airplane. So even if you've got passengers, you have a lot of cargo lift capacity on the 74. And so you have a world where if you can get the right mix of cargo and premium, it can pay for itself, maybe. But the A380, they never made it a freighter. Its cargo capacity is what it is, but that plane was focused on moving a lot of people between like major metropolitan areas, and that might ultimately be the thing that trips up the longevity of the A380 is the lack of its accessibility to be a cargo hauler in some capacity.
Interesting. Let me go to the chat here real quick, just to make sure we're not. Danny B, one of our great moms, with the $20 super chat. Thanks so much, Danny. Says, do you think more U.S. carriers will get on board with points pooling amongst family members earning mileage like British Airways does? I believe only United, JetBlue, and Spirit are amongst the few doing so statewide. Are you familiar with that?
Yes. So United just sort of rolled that out in the last couple months. If it works, look, all Delta, United, American, Southwest watch what each other do pretty closely.
Yeah.
If it's successful, then it'll be copied. I think you are, with your loyalty programs, you're looking for ways to get a leg up. You're also looking for ways for people to use their miles because you want those off your books as quickly as you can as an airline. Yeah. And a related note, don't do what I'm doing and sit on a ton of the frequent flyer miles because they only get less valuable with time. So, as you're a premium airline, giving a premium, you make the argument for being premium in part by giving people more choices to utilize the service. So, I think that if it works at United, don't think Delta's not paying attention. Don't think American's not paying attention. I think they're watching it. And if you're United, you want to give people one more reason to pick your carrier to have your experience, particularly if you're trying to pull people over. Like if I give miles to my buddy Aaron over here, who is not a United flyer, he may take a United flight, have a great experience, and go, I'm not flying my preferred airline ever again. So I think
Aaron, who do you fly?
Delta and American.
Delta and American. I don't blame you on Delta. Okay.
But, you know, so I think that's part of it, too, is if you can get people who otherwise wouldn't get in your seats and they have a good experience, can you win over some customers and all you did was let somebody pool their miles, which also helps you get those spent?
Yeah.
That's a win.
Jeez. Is that what makes this industry so competitive? Is that no one's... I mean, you got loyalty. I mean, you know, Delta, I like Delta, obviously you fly United, but if someone gives you a leg up another airline, you, all of a sudden you like fall in love and then you ditch your old friend basically overnight.
You know, it is a cutthroat business, and it is a business where, you know, the margins aren't huge, so you win customers where you can. And the fact that you have 4 carriers in the U.S. that control 80-ish% of the market, they've pretty much divided up the market. LA is one of the few places where you really do have a choice, where you can fly. You can be a Southwest loyalist and go pretty much anywhere in the country. You can be an American loyalist, a Delta loyalist, a United loyalist, go pretty much anywhere in the country and around the world with ease. But if you live in Phoenix, really your choices are American or Southwest, unless you really like connecting in Denver or Salt Lake or LA or somewhere else to fly a carrier. I end up on everyone, so you know, I do experience every carrier, but I do think where you can win someone over, you want to do it.
Yeah.
And folks that fly and like to travel, even if they only do it a few times a year, they do sort of like to have a favorite, it seems.
Yeah.
You know, they pick the credit card and they build the trip around that experience, and it becomes part of the journey.
No, I mean,
it does make it a little hard to travel sometimes with your friends if everybody is insistent on flying a different airline.
I always, how I book tickets is, where am I going? What's going to be, is someone going to have a heavy aircraft? Is it going to be a 787 or 777, or do I going to be stuck in a 737 again? Really, honestly, that's what it comes down to for me.
You want the wide body.
I want the wide body, but yes. But I'll tell you, an A321, I like the A321s as well. Real quick, I have another super chat question from DAL Virtual with a $5 super chat. Says, what is Mr. Van Cleave's feeling about the reduced seat spacing of all the airliners?
This is interesting. This is a topic we have covered very closely here over the years at CBS Mornings in particular. The 777 is a nice airplane to watch as it goes by there. You know, the real question around the seat sizing, I think, there's the question of comfort, and more space, I would argue, as a flyer is better than less, right? I think we can all agree that from a customer standpoint. The real question is a safety one. You know, the A350 accident in Japan, where everybody got off the plane safely, but it took 13 minutes. It raises a real question from when the accident happened to when everybody got off, 13 minutes. In theory, that should happen in 90 seconds from when the evacuation order is given. That's probably not a realistic figure. And one of the things that we don't know is, because when that number was created, seats weren't 28 inches apart. Does that seat distance make a difference in people's ability to get out of the plane? So this FAA reauthorization bill in Congress, this is an example where we covered regulatory stuff, has language in there where the FAA has to redo their seat size testing in terms of evacuation to mirror real-world circumstances, so we can have an answer to that question. Because we don't know.
Now, why did it take 13 minutes with the Japan?
There were some communication issues. The overhead, the PA system wasn't working. Also, there's a lot of people on that airplane.
Yeah.
And you had a fire situation, so you didn't want to use every exit. You know, it should be the standard. The certification standard is 90 seconds with half the exits blocked. Yeah. But you know, that factors in able-bodied people only who don't grab their bags. There aren't you know, support animals on board. There aren't people with disabilities on board. There aren't the elderly on board. There aren't small kids on board. You know, basically, all those things that are on every single flight don't get factored in. So I think when we're talking about from the safety side of seat size, there are some questions that just haven't been answered. The FAA did this testing in 2019, but didn't factor in. It was with 60 people in a simulated cabin. Everybody was able-bodied. There was no luggage. There was no smoke. Nothing was dark. There was no obstacles. It was just, can you get up out of this seat of varying sizes and walk off the airplane in 90 seconds? It was not a real-world test. what they're now going to be obligated to do is do real-world testing on various sizes of airplanes to try to get that answer.
Interesting.
So I think that's a really long answer to what do I think of the seat sizes. I think more space is better than less space. Whether or not that's a true safety question, I hope we actually have an answer to that in the next year or so. And if it is, then I think you might see some rules about how close seats can be.
That's interesting, because I've flown on the Delta A350 a few times in the back, and I felt it was really cramped. So hearing about the Japan A350-1000, that's a longer aircraft, it's good to know that they're going to go back and look at that, because I felt like I was a little cramped in there. Now, if it was safe or not, who knows? That's not for me to judge. But
everyone got off that plane safely.
Yeah.
And that goes really to a testament to how well these airliners are built. They're built, even in an accident, there's a safety envelope there that they shouldn't catch fire for some period of time. They shouldn't sink for some period of time, and it's enough time for people to get off the airplanes. It's not 90 seconds, but it's enough time, and I think that's really a testament to how well the Airbus and the Boeing aircraft are built, that when you have these accidents that are survivable, the amount of people that are able to get off the airplane. We think back to the San Francisco accident with the 777. That was an airplane that held itself together long enough to get the vast majority of those people off the plane safely. And I think Boeing and Airbus deserve credit for that, even with all of the safety questions that are hanging out there. These are really well engineered, thought out, and designed aircraft that are carrying you around the world.
Absolutely, they are. Real quick, we have another CPA 919 with a $5 super chat. Thanks so much. As thoughts about frequent flyer programs switching from miles to points.
Well, as somebody who spends a lot of time flying, I kind of liked the points being tied to the amount of time you spend in that seat. And I think for the frequent flyers, that's probably the preferred way. I get that, it's tied to dollar spend because the airlines are a business and they're going to run them like a business. Personally, I like the programs that don't over-prioritize the credit card points to the detriment of the people that are flying every day. I understand the credit card part of the business is lucrative, but so is the part where the people that fly you all the time. And I think on some carriers that's gotten out of balance. On others, if you fly a lot, you're going to end up spending a lot, so it sort of works out as a wash. But, I liked the good old days.
the good old days. I was going to ask you real quick. A lot of people, still to this day, a year later, your comment during your interview toward me about the tracksuits don't pay for themselves. That will be etched in stone right here on the history of this channel. Can you talk about that just real quick? Was that something that you were thinking about going into the interview, or was that just something you were looking at me and thinking, well, those tracksuits, they look nice, but they don't pay for themselves?
Well, I mean, the tracksuit's kind of your thing. And it is very like photog wear. So I see where the inspiration came from. I've seen, but we were talking about the sort of the economic viability of sort of this new kind of media, this new kind of experience. And, I just, sort of, as we were talking about that, was thinking, because, you left a very good, stable situation in legacy media, a good union job with good union benefits and to take a chance. And so I think what a lot of people have probably wondered is it worth it? My thought as we were talking about that was, well, the tracksuits can't pay for themselves. And I think when you're talking to people in an interview, you want it to be a conversation. You want it to be real and genuine, and that's what I was thinking, so that's what I said.
It was great. A lot of people that work in TV news, they say, Kevin's the smartest person ever. He got out of it. Now I'm talking about local. Your network, that's a whole nother level. That's where everyone strives to be in local news. They want to be in the national news. So, Kris, you made it. You made it, and people are watching you all around the world every night on CBS News.
It's been an adventure. I started in local news. I did that. I think. I think the local news, the local TV reporters and crews don't get the credit they deserve for how hard those jobs are. You know, so it's been fun. It's an adventure. I mean, and now I get to talk about airplanes most days. So.
Do you ever watch any of us live streamers on YouTube?
I watch you.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how. I mean, that's how we found out about you.
Okay.
I'd seen your webcast. I saw KBC did a story.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it. And we're like, we gotta go tell this story. I mean, it's
excellent.
It really is a great example of how, you know, the sort of new media, how an individual can be their own platform, can be their own voice, and really find a niche and build an ecosystem that's really unique. That you couldn't have done.
Oh, you could.
When we started in television.
Yeah.
This wasn't something you could even think of.
No, absolutely not. You need a live truck, which was, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. You need a transmitter. Yeah, you just couldn't do it. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. Well, Kris, I don't want to hold you up any longer. By the way, he also asked me a while ago, either you could take the one that's on the microphone. I also grabbed this one, so it's
awesome.
yours.
Thank
you collect these things are called mic flags.
Yeah.
In the world of TV news, everyone has a mic flag. They're professionally done. A lot of us collect them. I used to collect them as well, so I totally get it. Mic flag is yours,
Thank you.
Kris.
Thank you. It's my news nerd thing. It'll look great on the wall.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for stopping by here, Kris. Come back and do another story on us anytime. Maybe a follow-up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. I hope we answered everybody's questions.
I think so. I'm sure there's a ton that I couldn't get to, but of course, you know, we're in it deep in conversation. We got the Queen pushing back, so we got to get back to the planes.
Yes.
But Kris, thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having me.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Have a good flight back to Phoenix,
Thank
and
you.
we'll see you soon.
See you soon.
All right.